so I go to Saudi quite regularly. And the other day, one of my colleagues actually compared Saudi Arabia to a startup. And I guess the reason being is everything's happening at once. So it's almost like it's chaos, right? So you're building all these big things, projects everywhere. Then I think it was a couple of months ago, I was there and I saw the developments near the airport. I don't know if you've seen those housing developments, right? Accommodation. And everything is kind of at its infancy and encouraging people to come in. Foreigners will go in and live there. A little bit like what probably Dubai did 20 years ago. But it's so right now, what is important for people to understand is there is so much emerging at a fast, because every month that I go, there's something new to see, right? All the restaurants that are coming in, it's almost like, in Jeddah, it looks like Miami, most places that you go to, right? So it's kind of emanating a lot of what the US is about. So for the audience who are concerned about structures and setups, would you say it's right to say, don't think, just do it, just invest? Because if you are serious about being part of something this big and this exciting, it's good to get in early rather than to wait, because by the time you thought about it, it's always too late.
Yeah. I mean, I think, getting early, I mean, the landscape in Saudi for the last 5 years has it's been busy here for a long time. And it certainly doesn't feel to me like it's a startup and is at the start of that program. We're already now beginning to see some of the vision projects coming to completion. So some of the hotels opening in the Red Sea, for instance, and the infrastructure now completed for King Salman Park here in Riyadh. There are a whole host of projects that may not have actually been publicised as much as they should have done, maybe in terms of completion. But I think for me there is lots and lots of opportunity in Saudi. People firmly fixed on 2030 because it's a 2030 vision, but look, the development and the transformation of Saudi will go on for many, many decades.
Yeah.
One thing there is absolutely no doubt of is, the Saudi leadership's commitment to transforming their country, and that's already been witnessed in what's happened to date, and that will continue for many years to come.
So we've seen lots of things change over the past couple of years with new incentives, new rules coming out, new options for people to set up. So what would you say are the common changes you as a business have seen in the last, say, 12 to 18 months?
Well, I think, look, the business of setting up a business and operating a business in Saudi is complex. It's simpler than it was, and it's certainly more structured than it's ever been.
Yeah.
But it is complicated. There are rules that probably don't apply to other countries in terms of sort of regulatory requirements and things like nationalisation, and we'll probably pick up on that later. That said, if I go back sort of 5 or 6 years, it was very, very difficult. It is simpler now, but it is still complicated. But there are a set of rules, and there is quite a high level of bureaucracy. And if you follow process and you follow the rules, then you can operate quite easily within Kingdom.
So what made you proceed with getting the RHQ, given that you already have entities in Saudi and you're registered, you're trading, because this is a common question that I get from a lot of people. They ask and they say, what are the options for setting up, and why do we need an RHQ? So it'd be good to just hear it from somebody who knows everything in terms of setup and structure.
Yeah, so I think there was 2 drivers for us around the RHQ. First was legislative. So a lot of the customers that we work for, so probably 95% of our work is public sector. And, there are legislative requirements now for businesses like ours. It's mandated from the 1st of January this year to have a regional headquarters based in Saudi Arabia if you're operating across the Middle East. So first of all was a legislative requirement, but for us it was a natural evolution because, the way our business has grown in Saudi Arabia over the last 3 years, we've gone from a headcount of around 100 people to 2,300 people now as of today. It's just been a natural transition for us. 70% of our regional revenue is in Saudi Arabia. So, it became an absolute no-brainer for us. Why would you not have your regional headquarters where 70% of your workload's coming from, right? So, and the RHQ legislation gives you certain benefits as well, from things like Saudization, etc. So, for us, it was a natural transition. It was a legislative requirement, and you put those two things together, and it's an absolute no-brainer.
So we've got Saudization, as you know. I mean, you're obviously at the forefront of that, managing local nationals versus expats. And I think the line of work that you do, it's quite heavy on the volume of bringing in expats from all over the world to the country. So how have you seen that evolve? Has the RHQ made any difference, or is that still managed by the other entities? I mean, how are you balancing the workforce integration into Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, so look, I mean, our RHQ is our principal entity in Saudi Arabia. We have a number of other trading entities, and there's a complexity around that in relation to the activities that each one of those businesses do. But we're one business where Atkins Realis umbrellaed under a regional headquarters. So I think in relation to balancing Saudization, I mean, look, Saudization is a nationalisation is a complex subject. We could probably spend an hour quite easily on that, but I think it is important to understand the requirements of that. And the Saudization percentages change depending upon the activities that you're undertaking. We employ over 600 Saudi nationals now in our business. In some respects, Saudization, nationalisation in Saudi is in some ways easier than other areas. I mean, without naming names, there's other parts of the region that have brought in a nationalisation agenda, and the actual population located in those countries is far less than there is in Saudi Arabia. So, from the perspective of us employing Saudi nationals, first of all, there are millions more than in other geographies across the region, and the level of education and the level of willingness to learn and to work is fantastically high in Saudi. So we don't have a challenge at all in identifying talent and employing that talent in our business.
There are so many opportunities around it, the building the smart cities, the technology that is formed with it, all of the other infrastructure projects that are part of this. So I guess what people will probably want to understand is, how can you win these projects? Because if the opportunities are in the kingdom right now, there is a lot of encouragement across the board around the world for companies to come in, set up and bid for projects. So just generally, you've obviously been at first-hand experience of bidding for projects. How challenging are they? How difficult are they? And I mean, we know the opportunities are there, so it'd be just good for people to get an insight. And it's always good to know the good, but also the bad with it as well, so people can be well prepared.
I think look for us, Asma, as any business anywhere needs a strategy in terms of how it plans, a strategy in a business plan, how it plans to develop over a certain period of time. And one of the dangers with Saudi is the wealth of opportunity. And I know of other companies that have stretched themselves too thinly and bid everything and won nothing. For us, it's a case of everything we do is grounded in a client relationship. So we spend a lot of time talking to our clients, engaging with our clients, understanding their business, and then shaping ourselves accordingly. Honestly, we could bid thousands of projects every week, and we don't. We're very selective on who we work for and what projects we work on. And I think anybody coming into Saudi Arabia, regardless of what sector they're operating on, I would operating in rather, I would, focus down on a strategy and a business plan, and then try not to get diverted away from that, because there is a lot of diversion, there is a lot of opportunity, there are a lot of bright flames that you can aim for, which sometimes have the opportunity to do more harm than good. So I think have a business plan, have a strategy, develop client relationships, deliver work really well, or products, or whatever sector it is you're working on, and then, strategically focus to win on opportunity projects.